Here's the tutorial for how to make the flower tie top. I'm going to be following along with the instructions, so don't forget to print out your instruction booklet. Before you print your pattern, make sure you take a look at the size guide that's inside the instruction booklet and find out what size is right for you. All the PDF files are layered by size, so you can go ahead and just print the size that you need. For those of you who did print at home, most of the pattern pieces print on a single page since they're so small. However, there is one that we do need to tape together, and that is your strap piece. For the strap piece, you are just going to put the edge of the paper to the edge of the paper and tape down the middle. There'll be no overlap. Once you have that piece taped, go ahead and cut out all your pattern pieces and then grab the fabric that you'd like to use. So these are all your fabric and lining pieces, and then here is the paper template. There's one paper only template piece in this pattern. Cut that out in your size. Do not cut any fabric out of this. Make sure to pay attention to the direction of the grain line on the pattern piece and align that with your grain line of the fabric. Don't forget to press your fabric before you cut it, otherwise all your pieces are going to end up wonky and weird. Don't skip the press. Once you have everything cut, it should look roughly like this. We're going to start by assembling the strap. The fast way to do a strap is to just fold it correct side to correct side and put it right through your machine. The correct way would be to fold it in half, press that, and pin it, and then go to your machine. I'm going to do it the quick way. Step one is done. All the ties are sewn, despite my loop turner trying to sabotage me. Next up, we are going to prepare the oval applique. So you have your fabric oval and your lining oval, and you are going to place them correct side to correct side, lining up the bottom notches. You're going to sew all the way around. You're going to leave roughly a 2-inch gap in one side. If you're using a contrast lining like I am, so the lining fabric is different than my self fabric, trim a little bit around the edge of your lining. This will help the lining stay on the lining side and not peek through to the fabric side. Once you have your oval sewn, you're going to go ahead and clip the seam allowance. Clipping the seam allowance is when we cut perpendicular to the seam, and we're going to do this around curved edges and also corners, and this makes it so that when we turn it right side out, there isn't pulling and everything will lay flat. Clip all the way around the circle, adding extra clips where the curve is most severe. Now we're going to turn it correct side out through that opening that we left and give it a quick press once it's all lying flat. Make sure they are fully turned out and make it as smooth of a curve as possible. Next, we're going to assemble the bust cups. I've laid out all the bust cups. You'll have your 2 fabric bust cups and your 2 lining bust. So for each bust cup, you're going to take 1 bottom bust cup center, that's this piece here, and then 1 bottom bust cup side, and you are going to place them correct side to correct side and pin along this princess seam here. Just as a double check, make sure that this apex of the curve is facing up towards the top bust cup. This is a short seam, so there's no additional notches to line up in the middle. However, start by pinning it end to end, and then working your way slowly towards the center, and that way you don't end up with any unevenness. Once we have this princess seam pinned, I'm going to go ahead and stitch it at a 1/2-inch seam allowance. Once we have it stitched, we're going to go ahead and clip this seam allowance as well, and then we're going to press the seam open. Next, we're going to sew the completed bottom bust cup to the top. We're going to place correct side to correct side and pin along this edge here. You want to make sure the top bust cup bottom knot is aligned to that princess seam that we just created. So those two should line up. And then we're going to start by pinning in the middle, pinning in the ends, and then again working our way towards the midpoint of those line segments, and that way you're not getting any wrinkles or ease at one side or another, and it's going to be smooth. Once you have that seam sewn to connect the top and bottom bust cup, again we're going to treat the seam in the same way that we've treated all the others. We're going to clip it and then press it open. Once you have a bust cup sewn, you can do a quick test fit on yourself just to make sure it's roughly fitting where you want it to be, or if you need to make any adjustments, because what we just did for this, we're going to repeat twice for the lining and then 1 more time for the other fabric one. Now you should have all 4 bust cups sewn, so it's 2 fabric, 2 lining. Next step, we're going to assemble the flower. Here is ultimately what it's going to look like once it's all sewn together. We're going to start by taking our bust cup, find the bottom edge from the center to our princess seam, and we're going to line that up with the bottom side petal from the center to the notch we created in the petal. So these are going to get pinned from right there and then sewn at a 1/2-inch seam allowance. Then once we have that one together, we're going to go ahead and repeat the process for the bottom center petal. These both have notches, so they're just going to get lined up from center to the notch. And then you're going to repeat on the other side, and then we're going to do exactly that to assemble the lining flower as well. As we go around and assemble the flower, we're going to do the same treatment on all of these seams that we did on the others. So we're going to clip any curved seams, and then we're going to press the seam open as we go. Once you have all those petals sewn together, it should start to look something like this. And then on the reverse side, make sure that all your seams are pressed open. Totally optional step, but if you do want to top stitch the seam allowance, top stitch around all these seams that we just created, now is the time to do that. Now that we have the fabric flower assembled, go ahead and repeat all those steps we just did, but for the lining. With both fabric and lining flowers assembled, now we're going to attach the straps to the fabric flower. You're going to align the straps at the different notches. So we have our two top bust point notches, we have this side seam here, and then we also have a bottom side petal notch. You're going to take the open end of your strap and then pin it to the knot, and then have the strap facing inward. Once I have all my straps pinned in place, I'm going to do a basting stitch on each to secure it in place. Important to note, you want to sew the basting stitch at only a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that way when we do the 1/2 inch seam allowance with the lining, it's going to get hidden in there. And a basting stitch is just going to be the longest stitch length on your machine. Once all your straps are basted in place, we're going to attach the lining. This is the second to last step. Before we get ready to attach the lining, 2 things you want to do to prepare the piece is make sure that your straps are secured internally. We're going to be stitching around the entire perimeter of the flower, so make sure the straps are securely in the middle. If you want to even pin them down to the flower so they stay out of the way, that's always great. Nothing worse than when you finish a nice big long seam and realize you stuck a strap up into it. So secure your straps out of the way, place correct side to correct side of the lining on top. If you have a contrast lining like I do, I went ahead and just trimmed a little bit around the entire edge of this flower so that when we turn it right side out, the lining shouldn't be poking forward to the fabric side. Pin all the way around this edge of the flower, making sure that this open middle oval stays open. That's how we're going to turn everything right side in. Don't worry, it's going to get covered up in the end. When you're pinning, start by matching all the notches and seams and corners first, and then again, like we've done with other seams, work your way to the midpoint of each of those. That way you don't end up with any bunching or wrinkles. Once you have the fabric and lining pinned together all the way around, we're going to stitch at a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the outside. Go really slow around the curves, and then when you get to the corners, make sure you get right up in there to where it meets the seam, and then pivot your machine and start the next one. Now that you have your flower sewn to your lining, it's almost time to turn it right side out. However, we need to do a lot of clipping. After everything is sewn, you have lining to the fabric. We're going to clip all the seam allowance so that when we turn the piece correct side out, everything lays flat. Good rule of thumb is the tighter the curve, the more clips you should put, and also make sure to clip into those corners, but don't cut through your seam, obviously. In addition, at the strap points, to reduce bulk, just go ahead and trim that excess off. Once we get this all clipped, we're going to turn it correct side out. For the final step, you need your oval applique that we completed, as well as the paper template. You're going to take your oval applique and you're going to put it lining side up. This is the side that we're going to be marking on. I also have my chalk. Don't forget to notch. I'm going to take the paper template and place that on top of my oval. I'm going to mark these 2 points here. This is where the top of the flower is going to sit, as well as my center bottom. Now that I have my top markings and my center bottom, flip your flower so it is also lining side up and lay it on top of your applique. It should overlap roughly a 1/2 inch, but definitely should be enough to cover your zigzag or overlock that you have around the center. We're going to be sewing from the top side, so just make sure that when you're pinning in a way that you'll be able to see all the pins from the top side as well, so you can remove them. What I would recommend is doing a couple pins from this side to keep it secure, and then we'll flip it over, do all of our pinning, and then remove these underside ones before we go to the machine. Now I'm going to pin from the top side and making sure that everything is looking even, all my zigzag stitches covered, and get it ready to go to the machine. Once you have your oval applique pinned in place, top stitch at 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of that oval all the way around. This is also how your oval that we left the 2-inch gap in is going to get closed up. It's done! Optional finishing step, if you want to go around and top stitch around the petals so that they match the top stitching on the center oval, that's an option. Otherwise, enjoy your flower top.